It's all quiet in the underground bunker. Doors closed, locks bolted. But the Great One isn't just resting on his laurels. He's making sure your weekend is even better by giving you his best. This is the best of Mark Levin.
Man, oh man, the shepherds. Lots going on out there, America. And we will get into all of it. We're going to have two special guests during this program. We're going to have Matt Taibbi, who's going to walk us through what Tulsi Gabbard found as the Director of National Intelligence. That's next hour. And in hour 3, Zuhdi Jasser, we're going to talk about what's going on in Syria and the fact that we have an individual who's an envoy to Syria, Turkey, and Lebanon, a guy by the name of Tom Barrack, who in my view is a disaster. In my view, he should be fired. A complete disaster. And I'll get to that later. You've never heard of him, and I will explain why he's a disaster. And part of it has to do with the fact that I got a video about 90 minutes ago. And I opened this video, and I shouldn't have opened it, because it's very upsetting. And I'm not going to tell you who gave it to me. And it was a video of a Syrian terrorist who I believe is part of the Syrian army. With his his face covered, surrounded with other, and this individual was surrounded by others of his sort. Fairly young man, thrown to the ground. And while he was alive, they carved out his heart. It is now an image that I can never erase from my mind. Just a civilian who they grabbed. And this guy cut out his heart, pulled it out of his chest, and held it up for everybody to see. Now, the other day, the Israelis, who have a significant Druze population, Druze are Arab Christians. That's what they are. They've been around thousands of years. And the Syrian army and the Bedouins and others, ISIS is still there in some form under a different name, are trying to ethnically cleanse the Druze, eliminate them. The video that is out there about how they're slaughtering people in hospitals, doctors, and so it's hard to stomach. So the Israelis have come to their defense. The Israelis have a significant Druze population on the border with Syria, around the Golan Heights. Some 700,000, give or take. And they've been asked by the Druze community to please help. There's not another country on the face of the earth that's helping. None. And so the Israelis have been helping. Their air force has gone in there. They have warned the Syrians. This regime is led by a former ISIS leader who worked with Al-Qaeda, who has said that he's now reformed and is now backed by a number of Arab countries, including Qatar and Saudi Arabia and the UAE. But the Syrian army is involved in these slaughters. And so people are saying, what the hell's going on here? I thought we lifted all these sanctions. So I'm getting into it now, obviously. We lifted all these sanctions to give them a shot at the request of the Saudis and the Qataris. And so the Israelis have come to the defense of these people. Nobody else has. And there was some kind of an arrangement that had been made where the Syrians would pull back and they'd pull back these terrorists. But that's been broken. And so we have an envoy. I don't know who this guy is, but Zuhdi Jasser does, and we'll get into this in hour 3. His name is Tom Barrack, or Barrack, B-A-R-R-A-C-K. I don't know this for a fact, but I believe he's one of the great leakers that we have, and there's two others who I think I know who they are too. But if I'm wrong, so be it. It's just a surmise on my part, given the nature of the leaks to Axios and given what's said substantively. But he's not the only one. And if he's not the one, so be it. But it really doesn't matter, does it? Because he went on the record with the Associated Press. And you know who he condemned, Mr. Producer? The Israelis. The Israelis are making it more, quote-unquote, complicated. Because they're defending the Druze who are being slaughtered in a genocidal, ethnic attack, war, terrorist invasion, whatever you want to call it, trying to wipe them out, and in the most horrendous ways, going into their hospitals and slaughtering their doctors and their nurses and the patients, kidnapping the babies. They have video of it online. These are animals. Just like the animals who attacked the Israelis on October 7th. Same mindset. These are people that come out of the ISIS, terrorist mindset. Now they have different names. Now they're part of the Syrian government. So people are wondering what exactly is going on here. And the head of Syria is an ISIS, or was an ISIS, mass murder, torture. And what does he say? Well, the Druze started it. The Druze don't have enough people. They don't have enough weapons. They don't have anything to start anything. He's a liar. He's a terrorist. But my focus is on this guy, Barrack, Tom Barrack. The idea that the one country that is stepping in to try and protect these people is making the situation, quote unquote, complicated is sickening. And if you saw what I saw in this video, carving out a heart in another person's chest. And this poor guy, he was thin, there was nothing to him. And they grab him and they do it, and what they're doing to people there. And for our envoy to talk about how matters are being complicated because the Israelis are trying to defend these people and help these people, how sick is that? His ass should be fired, in my humble opinion. I don't know who he is. I don't know his connection. I don't know anything about him. I don't need to. Sick. And, of course, the Syrians and the ISIS wannabes, they hear this guy criticizing the one country that's trying to defend the Druze, the Christian Arabs, and what do they take from it? Motivation. That's what they take from it. Motivation. Sick. Sick. I won't even post this. It's so grotesque. I won't post it. You have to take my word for it. Tulsi Gabbard has released information that is stunningly unbelievable. Now, it's believable in the sense that we kind of knew this, but this connects all the dots. And we're going to have Matt Taibbi on, who's quite good, in hour 2, editor of Racket.News, to discuss this with us. When we come back, I want to remind you of something. This is very important that this information is coming out. Very important. Some people are dismissing it. Democrats, a couple legal analysts. But, of course, we don't care if they dismiss it or not. We think for ourselves here that Obama was, in fact, behind this. That the senior ranks of the Obama regime knew exactly what it was doing. And it was trying to take out Donald Trump from the get-go. Yours truly told you this from the get-go.
Mark Levin.
Making your weekend even better. This is the best of Mark Levin.
Interesting how you're not allowed to investigate Barack Obama as a former president, you know. Not allowed to subpoena him, not allowed to criminally examine him, bring him in front of a grand jury to see what he knew, when he knew it. With respect to the effort to overthrow the 2016 election and destroy the Trump presidency and to launch criminal investigations. Now that's pretty precious, isn't it? Considering what they did to Donald Trump? No, it should be full steam ahead. I also hear one of the reporters talking about the Supreme Court decision on immunity, that it benefited President Trump, and so hence it now benefits Obama. Well, maybe he's reading a different opinion than I am, or these people are whispering in his ear, giving him a different advice. Yes, a president has immunity from his official acts. But if a president of the United States sought to advance a coup, to commit crimes of other sorts, they're not immune from that after they leave office. That's for sure. But in any event, a full-fledged investigation, criminal investigation, is absolutely warranted, despite the best efforts of some never-Trumpers with law degrees and left-wing Democrats and so forth with law degrees, trying to tell you that what's the big deal. We already knew the Russians tried to intervene in the election, but they failed, is the line that they use. That's not the point. That's not the point. The point was the allegation that Donald Trump worked with the Russians to steal the election from Hillary Clinton. That's the point. And the leaks that transpired as a result of that. Now we have documents out of the intelligence agencies that were released by Tulsi Gabbard. And we're told to move along. We're not going to move along. I want to get into that a little bit more thoroughly in the response from the Obama president's office. But the precedent that's been set here, of course, is that a former president can be criminally investigated. They came up with their phony claims against Donald Trump, and they spent years investigating him. Grand juries, indictments at the federal, state, and local level. Apparently, we don't have any attorneys general at the state level with the guts to do a damn thing, let alone at the local level. I'm just being honest. But before we get into all that, you know, this book on power, it's been distributed widely by the publisher to various press people, various hosts, various columnists. We'll see if they write something or say something, but it's interesting. I already saw one that pretty much was picking and choosing information that's in the book. That's always kind of troubling to me, bothersome to me, and this is an individual that would never actually interview me. So I discuss this stuff with you directly. Now, the reason I mention this book in the course of a radio show like this that's talking about current events and so forth, although we do history and philosophy and so much more here, is because this book relates to all aspects of human behavior, whether it's ancient, more modern history, whether it's current, whether it's in your individual lives, your familial lives, your job, your community, or the country generally. And every book I write really does have that kind of a reach, but this one especially. And so this book is broken down into a number of areas. And remember what I've said. The issue here to me is for people to start to think about liberty and tyranny, to think about private property rights and Marxism and Islamism and so forth and so on in the context of power. Power. And so the book is divided into several chapters, although not many. On power is the overarching first chapter, negative power and positive power. And tonight I want to talk about negative power because this affects what's going on right now. Tomorrow I'll talk about positive power, and I get into language, rights, and liberty as well. These are the key aspects of control or freedom, depending on where your head is. Us, we're on the freedom side. So what is negative power? I developed these categories so we can better analyze what power is and why it's so important. Again, we talk about liberty, but liberty in and of itself doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. If you don't have the ability to institute a system that recognizes the individual, free will, and so forth, and so, you don't have liberty. So the issue really is power. Power. Power comes first. Then you determine the extent to which you do or do not have liberty or tyranny or rights and so forth. As I researched this book, it's very interesting. Power is not the same thing as liberty. Power is not the same thing as rights or unalienable rights. Interesting. And yet they overlap. Power is not the same thing as little d democracy or little r republicanism, although they overlap. But as you can see from what I'm saying now, power is at the core of all of it. Liberty, tyranny, representative government, fascism, Marxism, Islamism, you name it. And this is why an honest and thorough investigation of that term and the force of that term is necessary. So when we think of things, we start to think of them, in my view, in a different way. This is how the Marxists, the Islamists, the fascists, or even the Democrats pushing authoritarian democracy, this is how they get away with what they get away with. Because we'll beat our chests about liberty, that's not free, that's not representative government, but which is obviously the outcome, the end game. But if we're not going to debate power and confront this issue of power when it is being used against us, and embrace it and nurture it when it's being used on our behalf, well, we can talk about liberty and democracy all we want. It won't matter. So what I'm going to do here is, it's a thumbnail sketch. Obviously, the book is much more comprehensive and thorough, but for our purposes here, so what's negative power? It's coercion. It's control. It's force. It's the antithesis of what is necessary for individual liberty, consensual and representative government, a civil society. It involves language control, thought control, manipulation, new words invented by the state, by the ruling class to advance their cause, changing the meaning of old words for the same reason. They're not interested in intellectual engagement or debate or challenges. Propaganda, repetition, control communication. They want conformity, obedience, regurgitation. You know, I write in the book, this is what wokeism has been about. And somebody picked up on this today and used it right out of the book. But that's okay. Wokeism. Wokeism is a new authoritarian tool. It's a new authoritarian tool. You have to say certain things, say them in a certain way. You can't distinguish between men and women. You've got to use pronouns. The whole kit and caboodle of wokeism. You get a scarlet letter. It can affect your career. It can destroy your reputation if you don't fall in line. Wokeism is a new form of Marxism, fascism, totalitarianism, authoritarian democracy. That's what wokeism is. It's just a new way of control, controlling thought, controlling behavior, controlling outcomes. All of this is in the book. So what's the goal? The goal is to create followers, adherents, fanatics. And anybody who steps out of line, well, they're to be diminished, denuded, smeared. Negative power is unmoored from the Bible. That teaches us that the sovereign is God and that we, his people, his children, when it comes to earthly governance, we're the sovereign over our futures here on earth. Not the ruling class, not a handful of individuals. We are the people with certain constraints and restraints. That's what your declaration says for a reason. Negative power rejects this basic biblical teaching. It rejects Reformation. It rejects the Enlightenment. It rejects people like John Locke and Montesquieu, who talk about the distribution of power, power versus power. Because the Marxist communists, the Islamists, the authoritarians, they want the centralization of power, as I indicated earlier. So this whole idea of divided power, which is central to our republic, which is really the key to our Constitution, which is the key to limiting authoritarianism, this is rejected by those who embrace negative power, like the Democrat Party, but I'll deal with that later. What else? The dehumanization of the person. You're not really a human being. You're part of a collective. You're part of a collective. This is why people do not, on that side, the negative power side, do not or are not offended when you talk about the tens of thousands of women who were sold into sex slavery, the missing 325,000 unaccompanied minors. They're not viewed as individual human beings. They're not viewed as individual human beings. It's just a mass, a mob. And the ends justify the means. So you have dehumanization and the re-engineering of the individual. The individual, as Marx points out, but he's not alone, this whole idea of individualism must be destroyed. It's the collective. It's the commune. It's the ruling class. It's the centralization that is to be embraced. You can't have that if you have individuals who are off on their own, motivated by their own wants and their own needs and just their own desires. You can't have that. You exist for, under negative power, you exist for, and at the behest of, those who exercise negative power. You exist for Washington, D.C. You exist for the swamp. You exist for the bureaucracy. You exist for the politicians. You exist for the health care program or the Social Security program. You exist for that. You don't exist for your own well-being. Again, this is a new way of thinking that's very, very important when we listen to people like Mamdani or Tlaib or AOC or Bernie Sanders. And the reason I felt this book is so important, the reason I'm pressing this issue, is because I don't think we effectively counter these people. We rub our hands about how crazy they are and how wrong they are and their ideology doesn't work. But why doesn't it work? Why doesn't it work? And what's at stake? They talk about affordability, but your very existence, your lifestyle, is at stake when they're talking about affordability. Now, we can address affordability. That's not complicated. But my whole purpose here, my whole purpose in this book, my whole purpose in the presentation, and the media effort that I'm going to make connected to the book, here, TV, Blaze, interviews galore, is so we can start perceiving and thinking differently and talking differently about the problem. I want to get into this stuff with Russia. I've posted a few things for you if you want to check it out on social media. My interview where Pete Hegseth interviewed me for Fox and Friends Sunday. And I posted the presentation there, which really laid out the case. There's some confusion out here. And it is troubling to me. There's some confusion. I see the media are horrendous. Other than Fox, the way the media are reporting this is repulsive. There's nothing new here, nothing we didn't already know. Now, of course, the media are co-conspirators. The media were involved in this effort to destroy the Trump campaign and then to undermine his presidency. So we're not going to hold our breath with the media, that's for sure. But the whole point of this, folks, was to delegitimize the Trump campaign and then his presidency. That was the point. So the debate over what Russia was doing, or did it do enough, or did it not do enough, did it do enough, that's not the point. The point is the information was used. It was used for the purpose of trying to destroy the Trump candidacy, delegitimize it, and destroy his new presidency. That was the point. And there were leaks from the FBI, leaks from the Department of Justice, the mothership, leaks from the intelligence agencies. The CIA director turns out to be a liar, as we knew he was. The head of national intelligence, another liar, as we knew he was. Obama, how could Obama not know about this? I said this way back, 8.5 years. How could he not? It was in the newspapers. It was in the newspapers. That's where I got it from. But, of course, he had a more active role in that, didn't he? It's just like this game where they play they didn't know anything about the Tea Party that was under relentless and broad assault by the Internal Revenue Service. Remember that one? So, the Obama part of this is the claim that Russia wanted to get Trump elected. That never made any sense. We said it at the time. Why would they want Trump elected? He'll be tougher on Russia than Hillary Clinton. So that was a lie. Russia didn't want Trump to get elected. Then the Steele dossier. The Steele dossier was a lie. It was a fiction from beginning to end. And yet, as Gabbard points out, it was the main piece of information, as well as 3 discarded pieces of fake intelligence or useless intelligence, as a basis for creating this fabrication. And Obama ordered an intelligence rewrite, if you will, a new assessment. Even though he knew there was nothing to it, he ordered a new assessment in order to get some kind of basis for claiming there was something to it. So that's all they had. Now, keep in mind, this is the same administration that lied about Biden's cognition, the same administration that lied about the Hunter laptop, the same media, I should say, and now the Russia collusion hoax. So, of course, the media just blow this off as no big deal. They're very focused now on the Epstein matter, which, of course, all during the 4 years of Biden, they never mentioned, not once, in any significant way.
Mark Levin.
You're listening to the best of Mark Levin.
You might recall we went through this notion of negative power. Negative power. We talked about negative power, focus on coercion and control and force, the antithesis of individual liberty and representative government, that it pursues language control, thought control, and manipulation. They create new words in order to serve the ruling class. They create new meanings for old words. They use propaganda and repetition and slogans. They want conformity and obedience. They want to control communication. The goal is to create followers, adherents, fanatics. Negative power is unmoored from the Bible, the sovereignty being God, and here on earth, the sovereignty when it comes to government, God's children, that is we, the people. That's what your nation's based on, the Reformation, the Enlightenment, the civil society, a moral order, law and order, a just law and order. That is rejected. That is rejected. Negative power. The people are the slaves to the cause. The people are dehumanized. They're re-engineered. They exist for and at the behest of those who exercise negative power. In the West, it's more soft negative power, what I phrase it, what I coin here. That is, they adopt the methodologies of negative power but they're applied in a softer way, at least for a period of time. In the new bourgeoisie, I explained, Marxism, you have a bourgeoisie and a proletariat. Those are the basic two classes. Marx has subclasses too, but the bourgeoisie are the bad guys, the wealthy, the landlords, property owners, and the proletariat are the people, the working people who are put upon, the masses. But I said there's now a different approach to this, which I developed, which is the new bourgeoisie is about power. Not so much about materialism and wealth, although that can certainly be an antecedent to it. But basically, it's about power. And the new bourgeoisie would be, the Democrats, the left, the Marxists, the Islamists, because they wish to accumulate power, as much power as they can. They're not in the majority. And then they wish to impose their will on the new proletariat, which is you and me. I hope this is understandable. In the book, it's explained in much more detail. So the point is they're seeking authoritarian aims, and I came up with the phrase, because I think it's apt, authoritarian democracy. Because you go through the motions of voting, you go through the motions of a democracy, but you really have little say, if any say, and authoritarianism rules the day, and more it does, through an unelected bureaucracy, unelected judges, and so forth. And the fact that Washington's making so many of the decisions as opposed to your local city council or board of supervisors or so forth and so on, that's problematic too. And I talk about the deconstitutionalization, another word I coined, the deconstitutionalization of our government. There's this constant assault on separation of powers, on limited government, on the institutions that have been built to prevent mobocracy and to prevent centralized power, and they are constantly under assault by those who embrace this soft negative power. And I can go on and on about this, but I'm not going to. I told you last night that I would hit the opposite, the other side of the coin, which is positive power. And so we'll hit it very briefly. But again, I want to give you a flavor of this book, this brand new book. This is only a couple of aspects of the book. The book reaches a lot of topics in a very concise way. So positive power, as I explain in the book, starts from an altogether different premise than negative power. God is the sovereign. The Bible tells us this. And through God, his children, that is, the individual and the people, are sovereign. Thus, power properly understood and exercised in the context of government is about the well-being of the people, not the rulers. The people are the sovereign, not the governing authority. And importantly, the belief in God-given eternal truths, natural law, unalienable rights, that's the basis of a moral and virtuous society that transcends any ruling class. It comes before government. Now, one's approach to life and role in society and more involves practices and decisions, values, and beliefs that together form one's life philosophy, which results from learned, cognitive, reactionary, experiential, or even instinctive thought processes, and significantly, faith. Faith. When it comes to positive power, faith is vital, if not the imperative influence in the life of the individual, a nation, and even in countries that are said to be secular, and that formally or institutionally disclaim and seek to invalidate faith, including by indoctrination and force. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute, they have faith in some of these Muslim countries where terrorism is the coin of the realm. Later in the book, I explain the distinction. I can just touch on it right now, which is, in positive power, you have societies that, like the Judeo-Christian belief system in our society, which undergirds the founding of America, which undergirds the words in the Declaration of Independence. Very, very crucial. But in America, you have the fusion of faith, these Judeo-Christian values and principles, and the Enlightenment. That is, the application of these values and principles here on earth, the earthly application of these values and principles. So you have the fusion of faith, these Judeo-Christian principles, and the Enlightenment. In the Islamist world, you have the fusion of faith and coercion, that is, negative power, which I've explained also briefly, but nonetheless, you get the feel for it. In our country, you have the fusion not of faith and coercion, but faith and the Enlightenment. And of course, faith, as preached and practiced by certain religion or religious leaders now and in the past, has been used by despots and despotic regimes and other autocrats. They use it as power to brutalize, destroy, and kill. And again, later in the book, I explain the point I just made to you. Now, some of you may say, I don't have faith, or I have faith, I don't believe in it strongly, which is perfectly fine for you, but not in the founding of America. That may be your belief or your lack thereof, but America wasn't founded that way. America was founded on these principles. It's in the Declaration. They wrote about it. They spoke about it. So because America was founded on these principles, people who have no faith, people who have different faiths, or what have you, they can still live in the United States of America where there's tolerance, where there's debate, where there's challenge. You're not coerced. You're not coerced. This is positive power versus negative power. The founders did not believe they owed their origin to men and through men, but to a transcendent providence. That is, to a higher source than man, God. Faith was fundamental in America's founding. Indeed, Christianity was and is our nation's dominant religion. Moreover, without Judaism, there would be no Christianity. Together, Judeo-Christian values and beliefs redounded throughout our society from the earliest days of the colonists and still do today. But that doesn't mean each individual has to be Jewish or Christian or have a faith at all. As America became a nation, the United States is never intended to be, nor would it ever become, a fundamentalist religious state or theocracy, as one sees throughout the Muslim world and elsewhere. It was never to be a repressive religious state that smothers alternative religious beliefs, or a state that punished or silenced non-believers, atheists, agnostics. On the contrary, early on, religious tests and requirements that existed in some of the colonies would quickly disappear, and among other reasons, Judaism and Christianity do not seek to compel, let alone demand, doctrinal purity. The United States is among the most religiously tolerant nations on earth, and it's among the most religious nations on earth. In fact, it matters not at all what one does or does not believe to enjoy the freedoms and security that American society offers, which are explicitly protected by the Constitution. Explicitly. First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. It kind of sums it up, doesn't it? The reason is the distinction recognized in American society between the relationship of faith in the individual, faith in the community, and faith in the actual operation of government. And I go into this in much more detail that I won't bother you with here. Positive power originates not from mankind's hand or mind. This is the point. Although certainly its practical and earthly application does. But its origin is transcendent and inherent. When we speak of universal or eternal truths, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill, for example, good and evil, these are fundamentally moral precepts understood and ingrained in the human conscience and openly expressed in free and democratic societies. They're known to be true throughout the world, including among those who are oppressed by tyrannical governments, by the less educated or uneducated, by people of all faiths or no faith. It's not to say that all individuals and all cultures and all regimes adhere to these eternal truths. Some are evil, power-hungry, irrational. We know what they are: Marxist regime, Islamist, fundamentalist regimes, and so forth. And I go on. So the point is, positive power is fundamentally different than negative power. Negative power comes from mankind. And the purpose of negative power is to coerce, to control, to force. The purpose of negative power is to squeeze individuality and free will out of the individual. Is to re-engineer God's children into something that God never intended. You may have your own interests, your own motivations. Under negative power, that's not acceptable. You never hear the left talk about individual liberty. There's a reason. You never hear about them talking about property rights. There's a reason. You never hear them talk about unalienable rights. There's a reason. They use the word equality. But equality without freedom is tyranny. Equality without freedom is tyranny. It's enslavement. It's destitution. And that's what they stand for. That's what they believe. So positive power is what America was built on. And it's the thing that we need to keep talking about. Now, I developed this in a much more fulsome way, obviously, through the book. But I develop it in a way that is understandable, yet philosophical, that is applicable to everyday thinking, and to the nature of our arguments that we need to be making about government and so forth. There's a reason why negative power, those who practice it, reject faith altogether, and those who practice positive power embrace faith, but embrace it in a way that also embraces the Enlightenment. Its application here on earth. To do otherwise, well, wouldn't work, would it? Now, at times positive and negative power overlap. There's no question about it. There are some limits that you have to place on power, and some limits that have to be given to government. Your Constitution is the prime example of its emphasis on positive power and its protection and securing a positive power, but the application of soft negative power by imposing limits. By imposing limits. And as I explained last evening, in that sense, soft negative power really isn't negative power at all. It's a positive power because it promotes positive government, positive power. And so there will be more of that explained in the book, too. And this is just a couple of sections. I mean, we get into language and thought processes and thought control and how this works, the distinction between power, the word power and liberty, the word power and rights, what's meant by that, and power and democracy, what's meant by that. And I don't want to overwhelm you right now because it's not really fair to do a thumbnail sketch, but how else am I supposed to do it? I'm not going to read the whole book to you, although I do in the audio, but I mean on the air here on radio. But it's something that I think that you can relate to and will relate to. It's something I think where you'll say, wait, I think I've thought about that in a sense. Let me really see if I can apply it. And you're going to see people on TV especially, but also in this business, sort of cherry picking from this. I've already seen it. For instance, when I wrote American Marxism, this whole thing about oppressor and oppressed, clearly understood by Marxists, not really understood by people who are not Marxists. I emphasize it in the book. Every time I turn over our favorite network, I hear some host talking about the oppressed and the oppressor. They never talked about that before. So they learn from these books too. Just so you know, we circulate them widely to our friends in the media and others who've already read it. This whole issue of wokeism I heard talked about the other day in the book. Wokeism. So wokeism is a negative power play to force and control society to move in a particular direction. And that's elaborated on in the book too.
Mark Levin.
the Great One makes your weekend even better. This is the best of Mark Levin.
I've done a deep dive most of the day into this Tulsi Gabbard, the documents that she released. To the extent we have access to those materials, I examined them. That is, stories about them as well. I went back and I looked at the Durham report from 2017. I looked at this new release of this House Intelligence Committee report from 2020 that was released earlier this week, I believe. I went through it all. And let me tell you something. There's one thing that stands out more than anything else. That's not in the Durham report, that's not in the House report, that's not in any report. And that is the role of Barack Obama. This is the key. I want to make this as simple as I can. I can always get into the weeds, but it's best just to step back. Barack Obama was never investigated. Even at a lower threshold, he was never questioned. He wasn't questioned by Durham. He obviously wasn't questioned by the House majority, their committee. He wasn't questioned about what he knew and when he knew it and the actions that he took. The fact of the matter, you got to look at this as a criminal enterprise. Obama was the mob boss. The key meeting was December 16, 2016. Donald Trump was elected president. Their intelligence information indicates that, yes, Russia is trying, in a rather tepid and inconsequential way, to interfere in the election, but it's not effective. They have no evidence whatsoever that Russia is trying to help Donald Trump in any respect. None. But that meeting on December 16th, 2016, is when Obama called together a number of his senior staff, senior appointees in the law enforcement and national security realm, and directed that a new assessment be created. He was not happy with the existing assessment, which said what I just told you. And within less than a month, a new assessment did come back, indicating that Russia was heavily involved in the election on behalf of Donald Trump, which was a lie. A lie. This is important to understand. In addition, Obama was told before that Hillary Clinton and her campaign were going to allege that Russia was involved in the campaign to help Trump for two reasons. Number one, to take the attention off of her emails. And number two, to put Trump on the defensive. So her campaign paid for the Steele dossier. Every report indicates the Steele dossier was a lie. Every syllable in that report was a lie. And you'll notice how the media ran with it. And how for month after month after month after month after month it was used. And the president had to keep saying, or candidate Trump had to keep saying, he had nothing to do with this. But it was the narrative. All these leaks were organized to the New York Times, to the Washington Post, to all these usual suspect phony media sites. All of them. But Barack Obama, who likes to pretend he's above the fray, was right in the middle of it. He was right in the middle of it. Also, as I pointed out early on, not long before the Trump administration took office, Obama signed an executive order to expand significantly the sharing of raw intelligence information with agencies that in the past either couldn't get it or had to make a special request for it. And he did that, as I argued at the time, to help facilitate leaking against Trump. Now, in June or July of 2016, give or take, they also came to the aid of Hillary Clinton. The Department of Justice had a slam dunk case against her in violations of the Espionage Act with her emails. But Comey, who had no authority, announced at that press conference that he was not going to proceed. It wasn't his call, but he did it anyway. Think about that. So while they're helping out Hillary, they're trying to take out Donald Trump. Now, this is your CIA, your FBI, your intelligence agencies and other agencies. It's really shocking what took place here. Shocking. And so when I, on March 3rd, 2017, started putting all this together, it was based on all these leaks. They went to the FISA court 4 times, and the main information they used to get a FISA warrant, to get it the first place and then extend it 3 more times, was the Steele dossier, which Comey knew was false. And yet that's the basis, the core of what they used to get the FISA warrants. Think about that. So they lied to this FISA court, misled it clearly, to get what they wanted. But Obama's never been questioned. Our friend Lindsey Graham and John Cornyn, they're out there talking about the appointment of a special counsel. I can't think of anything more disastrous than the appointment of a special counsel. Why? Because they're not special. But more than that, they take forever, years. And there's no conflict of interest. The reason you appoint a special counsel or a special prosecutor is because there's a conflict of interest within an administration. So say they're investigating President Trump. Well, the argument is that the Attorney General, the DOJ, is under the president, so you need a special counsel. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about investigating former president, private citizen Obama. And the Department of Justice under Donald Trump is quite capable of conducting an investigation where there's not a conflict of interest. But Mark, the left might say, the conflict is they hate Obama. That's not a conflict of interest. The conflict that is addressed through the appointment of a special counsel is the internal conflict where a Department of Justice is said to be unable to independently investigate their boss, the president. That's not the case here. There should be no special counsel. And so when Graham and Cornyn proposed this, that's a black hole. That'll go nowhere. If it goes there, forget it. It'll be another 20 years till you learn anything else. What has to happen here is that Barack Obama needs to be questioned thoroughly, deposed, preferably under oath, so the perjury statute applies. But we all know that the false statement statute, 18 U.S.C. 1001, would apply regardless. About his role, some of the documents that Tulsi Gabbard released should be absolutely used in questioning him, which is why the Democrats are poo-pooing the whole thing. They know where this should go. In addition, Brennan, Clapper, Loretta Lynch, her successor, the acting attorney general, Comey, McCabe, all the usual suspects should be brought back and investigated. about Barack Obama's role, about his role. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you're hearing, again, some of these quacks out there, some of these lawyers out there who are telling you that we have a decision on July 1, 2024 from the U.S. Supreme Court on immunity. You've heard that, right, Mr. Producer? And they say, what's the point? He can't prosecute Obama as a private citizen anyway because he will have acted under his official constitutional duties. Now, I don't know why they're illiterate in reading Supreme Court decisions, but I went back and I read that decision today, too. That's not what the majority opinion says. That's not what John Roberts wrote. To put it concisely, he pointed out that there is absolute immunity when a president is acting within his constitutional bounds. Absolute immunity. But when the president acts sort of in the outer circle of his constitutional authority, there is presumptive immunity. Presumptive immunity, which has to be overcome by any prosecutor. And so that case has to be made in front of a judge with the defendant. This case would be Obama if we reach that point, or he would be charged if we reach that point. They would obviously put up the defense of absolute immunity, in this case, which I think would fail, or presumptive immunity, which I also think would fail. Now, what are we talking about? Let me give you an example. And this actually happened. Barack Obama, when he was president, I told you the other day, there was an imam in Northern Virginia, two of the hijackers who slaughtered our people on 9/11, went to that mosque. The imam was a terrorist. He was attached to Al-Qaeda. He fled the country and he went to Yemen. Obama took him out with a missile strike, but in doing so also killed his son, who was 15 years old and a U.S. citizen. Technically, theoretically, I suppose, that family could bring a case, or a case could be brought, a criminal case against Obama. I don't think so, but some people have argued that, but let's just say it's a possibility. That case would fail as a result of the constitutional absolute immunity of a president undertaking his constitutional duties, not on the outer circle, but squarely in the circle. Let's take another case. On December 16, Obama says, I want a reassessment of the intelligence because he doesn't like the fact or the information he got back on Russia the first round. And he gets the kind of report he wants, and he uses that report, and people use that report for the purpose of trying to destroy and undermine an incoming administration. That's not part of his official duties, is it, Mr. Producer? So I think you could overcome the presumptive, that's the key word, immunity, which nobody's talking about. Now they'll all talk about it since I'm talking about it. But none of them have talked about it. They just go, yeah, it's absolute immunity. That's the decision, absolute immunity. Some reporter says it, they regurgitate. It's like whisper down the lane, except they don't whisper. Then they all say the same thing. It's very annoying to me, very frustrating. But hey, what would the crime be? Maybe there isn't a crime. But in the course of an investigation, crimes can be committed. Remember, they call them process crimes: obstruction, false statements, perjury, destruction of document, whatever. So you conduct an investigation. There's no probable cause basis for conducting an investigation. It's just the reasonableness of believing that something awry may have taken place, some crime may have been violated. That's enough to open an investigation under the Department of Justice guidelines, which I also read today. I hope this helps a little bit. So when people say, there's nothing new here, we didn't learn anything here, and besides his immunity, we need a special counsel, it's all BS.
Mark Levin.
we're giving you nothing but the best of Mark Levin.
Now, you and I have a completely different set of values and beliefs, and apparently morals. That's even possible. Than those who embrace all-powerful government. This is the difference between positive power and negative power. Those who embrace negative power, the ends justify the means. And so they're more than happy to destroy the FBI, the Department of Justice, the CIA, and the other intelligence apparatuses within the government. It's okay. The abuse of power by the power-hungry is okay. So you and I are very upset about what we see here. We find what Gabbard has released and the information even before then to be extremely problematic, undermining the republic, undermining the rule of law. They don't care. It's like with open borders. Right, they're violating federal immigration law. Well, look at all these people coming across, terrorists and killers, and the fentanyl that's killing our citizens, and the women sold into sex slavery, and the children that are missing, 300 and some thousand unaccompanied minors. Do they sound concerned at all? Do they take actions to stem any of this? Nothing. Nothing at all. And now when it comes to the enforcement side, deportation, they're objecting. They're in the way. They reject it. So we come at this from a completely different attitude, and that is the point. And why I say there's negative power and there's positive power. We try to defend our institutions, defend the Constitution, the notion of separation of powers. We argue that each branch should stay in its lane, as spelled out in the Constitution. And that power is it's a very strong power the federal government has, but it's limited. It's limited. The rest of the power belongs to the states, and most of it belongs to you and me as the sovereign. They don't believe this. So we come at society from a completely different perspective, which is one of the important points I try to make in this book on power. And so here we have Gabbard, who releases information that makes it crystal clear that Barack Obama was the top mobster in this whole Russia collusion thing. He was at the center of it. But you hear the way CNN asks questions. You hear the way Clapper responds. They're offended that they've been discovered. They're offended. Now, the other thing is this. I explain in the book, and it's obvious that people are reading this book who got the book already, because they're using the book without citing the book. That's all right, but I did spend a lot of time on this thing. Good intentions, they say. Good intentions, in other words, virtuous. They make the case that what they believe in is virtuous. They believe, as evil as they may be, in their own self-righteous, egomaniacal way, narcissistic way, that they're virtuous in what they seek to do. Equality, affordable housing, reparations, open borders. Now, of course, they're power hungry, but they want to wrap themselves in virtue, in good intentions, as I explain in the book. And as Montesquieu said, one of the great Enlightenment philosophers, as C.S. Lewis said, one of the great lay Christian philosophers, there's nothing more dangerous than people who have power and exercise that power in the name of virtue. Good intentions. Because there's no boundaries to that kind of a mindset, to that kind of thinking. There's no boundaries. And so if it means a new assessment from the intelligence agencies, if it means leaking to the media, if it means interfering with the 2016 election, if it means trying to sabotage President Trump's administration early on and throughout, that's okay. That's okay. Because it's virtuous. The goal is virtuous. It's okay. If you're a federal judge and you decide to rule in a way that is inconsistent with your authority and the law and the Constitution, that's okay. Because what you're doing is righteous, virtuous. And you need to do it in order to accomplish your ends. This is negative power. And it's very dangerous. If you have to violate separation of powers, so be it. If you have to undermine the Constitution, so be it. If you have to attack our economic system, so be it. If there's 320-some thousand unaccompanied minors who are lost, so be it. So be it. And that's how they think. You and I don't think that way. It's a completely different mindset. It's a completely different mindset. They believe that power in their hands, and the more power, the better, will be put to good use because they say so. You and I believe that that is beyond dangerous. It's suicidal. That human beings are imperfect. That they have many character flaws, even the best of human beings. And the more power they get, the more those character flaws come to the surface. How do we know? We've seen it throughout history, human history. And so the Declaration of Independence is so critical in understanding this fusion between faith, belief in God, and He's the sovereign, and we as His children here on earth, we're the sovereign when it comes to government, and the Enlightenment. Locke and Montesquieu and all these ideas of limited power, separation of power, and that the people are the sovereign. And that the people who run the government, whether elected or appointed, they work for us, not the other way around. Not the other way around. And so you see in the party, the Democrat Party and other parties overseas and so forth, but the whole ideology is how to control you and me. How to focus on a collective of the kind that these power-hungry people want to create. They even get to the point of deciding who's good and who's bad. If you're a billionaire, you're bad. If you're an illegal immigrant who steal your way into the country, you're good. You're good. It's a completely different way of thinking. Their way of thinking creates power for themselves. Our way of thinking is no, there needs to be power. There needs to be power. But it needs to be ordered. And there needs to be a humanitarian aspect to it. Freedom, individual rights, free will, and so forth. They never talk about property rights. Now, what are property rights? What are they? I discussed this at length in the book, too. What are property rights? If you let's take your home. What is your home? It's a property right. You say your home is your castle. Well, why is that? Because you have used your intellectual and physical labor during your time on earth to build something that's yours, to create something that's yours, for you and your family. And nobody else has a right to take it, to control it, or to regulate it to a point where it's useless? Nobody. Now, why is that? Why are property rights so important? Because you only have so much time on Earth. And if you're going to spend 8, 10, 12 hours a day, 5, 6 days a week working, and then building up your finances. I'm not talking about millionaires and billionaires. I'm talking about middle-class people. And you decide to purchase a property or a home or whatever you do. That is the manifestation of your life's work that nobody should be able to take from you or diminish. Freedom. Freedom. Free will. You did that. You created that. That's why people are proud when they have their homes. They're proud to keep them up. If they're not handed them for free, which people haven't earned them, but you've earned it. You deserve it. You created it. Through your job or through your business. That's a good thing. That's the way it's supposed to be. That's positive power. Negative power is this guy, as an example, Mondani, who says, you know, we're going to eliminate the market system when it comes to housing. Well, what does that mean? That's not only crazy economically. What that means is what you earn isn't yours. Your home is not your castle. That the government will decide if you have a home, what kind of home, where the home will be. You've lost all control of your individuality and your self-worth. You've lost it to the government. Negative power. So you basically now work for the government. If the government can eliminate the private property market and seize the means of production, as this guy says, and destroy the home market, that you have to buy a home through them, that it has to be regulated through them, that they determine what you can and cannot have, then you've lost the most important of all power. Your personal power, which affects your liberty, which affects your rights. But for them, the more they control, the more power they have, this negative power idea, the more righteous they are in deciding who gets what. Because only they can decide what's fair and just and so forth and so on. And we've seen what this has done with societies in the past. And societies today, they're hellholes. They're destitute. They're police states. They're genocidal in many respects. They don't throw people in prison who've committed crimes. They throw people in prison with whom they disagree, who threaten the ruling class. This is very important to understand. Understand where these people would take you and me when they talk about the fundamental transformation of America. This is what they're talking about. These so-called democratic socialists, they are Marxist Islamists. That's what they are. Look what's going on in Britain. Free speech is dead. Free speech is dead. If you carry the flag of your country into a Palestinian protest where they're carrying Palestinian flags in Britain, you're arrested. You, carrying the British flag. Because you're said to be a provocateur. If you say things online, defending your belief system, defending your nationalism, you can be arrested in Britain. It's not just Britain, it's France. It's not just France, it's most of Europe. Most of Europe. So when power gets this big, operated by a government, which is a minority of the population, it has a domino effect. The individual is devoured. That means individual liberties are devoured. Individual rights are devoured. This is why I say power is so important that we understand this construct and this whole mindset. This whole mindset. And that we need to press our case. We need to make our case based on the fundamentals. We can talk about liberty. We can talk about rights. We can talk about tyranny. We can talk about thisism and thatism, and we must, and we should. But we need to put it in a more important context now. Because the real war, let me put it this way. The war on liberty is the war on your power. Your personal sovereignty. The war on rights. You know, they're going to redistribute rights and create new rights and so forth. That's a war, again, on that circle of liberty that is around you. Your power to live as you wish.